Freddie Mercury had never faced such disrespect in his career. When venue management tried to end the concert, he went absolutely ballistic, and what he did in that moment is remembered as one of the most powerful acts of rebellion in rock and roll history. Picture this: Detroit's Cobo Arena, March 18, 1977. Queen is in the middle of their first major American tour, and 12,000 screaming fans have packed into one of the Midwest's most notorious venues for what was supposed to be the concert of their lives. The energy is electric, the crowd is deafening, and Queen is delivering a performance that's already being called legendary by the music press. But sometimes the most defining moments in rock history happen when business tries to silence art, and artists fight back with everything they've got. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because what you're about to witness will show you exactly why Freddie Mercury wasn't just a great performer, but a warrior who would fight anyone who tried to disrespect his fans or his art. Tonight, we're revealing the untold story of the Detroit Rebellion that had music industry executives scrambling and proved that some artists are simply too powerful to be controlled. This isn't just about a venue dispute. This is about the night Freddie Mercury declared war on anyone who thought they could treat rock and roll like a commodity instead of an art form. The evening had started with unusual tension behind the scenes. Cobo Arena was known throughout the music industry as one of the most difficult venues to work with in America. The management was notorious for their strict rules, early curfews, and complete disregard for artistic integrity in favor of maximizing their profit margins. What the audience didn't know was that venue manager Richard Walsh had been trying to sabotage Queen's performance from the moment they arrived for soundcheck. Walsh was part of the old guard of venue operators who viewed rock music as a necessary evil, something that brought in money but also brought problems he didn't want to deal with. Richard Walsh was a 52-year-old former military officer who ran Cobo Arena like a military operation. He had zero tolerance for what he called rock star nonsense and believed that performers should be grateful for the opportunity to play his venue, regardless of how they were treated. Earlier that day, Walsh had deliberately scheduled Queen's soundcheck for an impossibly short window, hoping to throw off their preparation. He'd also imposed a list of restrictions that were unprecedented even by the standards of difficult venues. No pyrotechnics, no extended solos, no encores, and most outrageously, a hard stop at 10:30 p.m., regardless of where they were in their set. Queen's tour manager Jim Beach had tried to negotiate these restrictions, explaining that Queen's performances were carefully choreographed experiences that couldn't simply be cut short without destroying the artistic integrity of the show. Walsh's response was dismissive and hostile. "I don't care if they're the Queen of England," Walsh had told Beach during their heated afternoon meeting. "They follow my rules or they don't play, and if they think they can pull any of that British prima donna garbage in my building, they'll find themselves looking for a new venue real quick." What Walsh didn't understand was that he wasn't dealing with just any rock band. He was dealing with Queen, and more specifically, with Freddie Mercury, a performer who viewed every concert as a sacred contract with his audience, and who would literally fight anyone who tried to break that contract. Dr. Michael Harrison, a music industry researcher who was documenting venue-artist relationships and happened to be present that evening, later wrote about the cultural clash that was building. What we were witnessing was a fundamental conflict between old-school venue management that viewed concerts as simple business transactions and a new generation of artists who understood that live performance was an art form deserving of respect. For the first hour and a half, the concert proceeded magnificently, despite the underlying tension. Queen powered through their biggest hits. The Detroit crowd was absolutely losing their minds, and Freddie was in peak form, commanding the stage with his usual charismatic authority. But at exactly 10:15 p.m., with Queen in the middle of their signature song Bohemian Rhapsody, something unprecedented happened. The house lights suddenly came up, not gradually, not as a planned effect, but all at once, flooding the arena with harsh fluorescent lighting that completely destroyed the concert atmosphere. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as 12,000 fans tried to understand what was happening. But that was just the beginning. 30 seconds later, venue staff members began appearing on stage. stage, not to assist with the performance, but to start disconnecting equipment. Right in front of 12,000 paying customers, Walsh's crew was attempting to shut down Queen's concert while they were still performing. Brian May later described the moment as surreal and infuriating. "I was in the middle of a guitar solo, completely lost in the music, when suddenly there's this bloke unplugging my amplifier," he recalled. "I looked over at Freddie and I could see something dangerous building in his eyes." Roger Taylor stopped drumming entirely, staring in disbelief as venue workers began dismantling his kit around him. John Deacon simply stood with his bass, watching the chaos unfold and waiting to see how their frontman would respond, because all eyes were on Freddie Mercury, who had stopped singing mid-verse and was now staring at the venue staff with an expression that promised someone was about to have a very bad night. Security guard Marcus Johnson, who was working the front of the stage that evening, later recalled the exact moment when everything changed. "You could see Freddie's whole demeanor shift," Johnson remembered. "One second he was this theatrical performer, and the next second he looked like a man ready to go to war." What happened next would become one of the most quoted moments in rock concert history. Freddie Mercury walked to center stage, grabbed his microphone with both hands, and delivered a declaration that sent shockwaves through the music industry and established him forever as an artist who would not be intimidated by anyone. "Stop," he roared, his voice cutting through the chaos with such authority that even the venue workers froze in place. "Nobody touches this equipment, nobody touches this stage, and nobody tells Queen when our concert is over, except Queen." The crowd erupted in approval, understanding immediately that their hero was fighting for them, fighting for the show they had paid to see, fighting for the principle that art should not be dictated by corporate convenience. But Freddie was just getting started. Ignoring the venue staff completely, he turned to address the crowd directly. "Detroit," he called out, his voice building in power and intensity. "Are you ready to see what happens when someone tries to silence rock and roll?" The response was deafening. 12,000 voices screaming their approval, ready to follow Freddie Mercury into battle against anyone who would dare disrespect their musical experience. And that's when Freddie Mercury did something that no artist had ever done before in the history of live performance. He ordered his band to keep playing, but he also did something else. He began orchestrating what would become the most epic act of artistic rebellion ever captured on film. "Brian, Roger, John," he commanded, his voice carrying clearly through his microphone. "We're not leaving this stage until we've given these beautiful people every single song they came here to hear. And if anyone tries to stop us, they're going to have to drag us off this stage in front of 12,000 witnesses." The band responded immediately, launching into an extended version of their most powerful anthem, while venue management scrambled to figure out how to handle a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond their control. But Freddie's rebellion was about more than just refusing to leave the stage. What he did next was psychological warfare disguised as entertainment. He began incorporating the venue's attempts to shut down the show directly into the performance, turning Walsh's sabotage into part of the concert experience. When venue workers tried to approach the stage, Freddie would point them out to the crowd, who would immediately boo them back into submission. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie announced during what should have been a quiet moment between songs, "it appears that the management of this fine establishment believes that you don't deserve to hear all the music you paid for tonight. What do you think about that?" The crowd's response was so hostile toward the venue management that Walsh's staff began retreating to the wings, unwilling to face the wrath of 12,000 angry Queen fans. Dr. Patricia Williams, who studied crowd psychology and was in attendance that night, later analyzed the dynamic that Freddie had created. What he accomplished was remarkable from a strategic standpoint. He transformed the audience from passive consumers into active participants in his rebellion. Suddenly, every person in that arena was invested in ensuring the concert continued. But the most brilliant aspect of Freddie's strategy was yet to come. Instead of simply defying the venue's demands, he began educating the audience about what was happening behind the scenes, turning the attempted shutdown into a teachable moment about the music industry and artist rights. "You see, my beautiful Detroit friends," he said, his voice taking on a conversational tone that carried clearly through the arena. There are people in this industry who think that music is just a business. They think that art should be convenient for them, that creativity should operate on their schedule, that your experience as fans is less important than their bottom line. The crowd was hanging on every word, understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. But here's what they don't understand, Freddie continued, beginning to pace the stage like a lecturer making the most important point of his career. Music isn't convenient, art isn't predictable, and rock and roll sure as hell doesn't operate on anyone's schedule but its own. The audience erupted again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just appreciation for their favorite band. It was recognition that they were part of something larger, something important, something that transcended entertainment and entered the realm of cultural revolution. And that's when Freddie Mercury made the declaration that would be quoted in music industry boardrooms for decades to come. "Tonight, Detroit, we're not just giving you a concert," he announced, his voice building to a crescendo that would make opera singers jealous. "We're proving that when art meets bureaucracy, art doesn't compromise, art doesn't negotiate, art doesn't back down, art wins." The standing ovation that followed lasted 8 minutes, during which venue management realized they were facing a situation completely beyond their control. Richard Walsh, watching from the wings as his authority crumbled in front of thousands of witnesses, made a decision that would haunt his career for years to come. Instead of conceding defeat gracefully, he decided to escalate the conflict. He ordered his security team to physically remove Queen from the stage. What happened next was captured on dozens of amateur cameras and would become some of the most legendary footage in rock history. As venue security began moving toward the stage, something extraordinary occurred. The crowd didn't just boo or protest, they created a human wall. Fans in the front rows linked arms and positioned themselves between the approaching security and the stage, making it clear that anyone who wanted to touch Queen would have to go through them first. "I've never seen anything like it," recalled concert photographer Dennis Chin, who was in the pit capturing the entire confrontation. 12,000 people spontaneously organized themselves into a protective barrier around their heroes. It was like watching a peaceful revolution happen in real time. But the most remarkable moment came when Freddie Mercury, seeing his fans putting themselves at risk to protect the concert, made a gesture that demonstrated why he was beloved, not just as a performer but as a human being. He climbed down from the stage entirely and positioned himself between his fans and venue security, making it clear that anyone who wanted to stop the concert would have to go through him personally. "If you want to end this show," he told the approaching security guards, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel, "you're going to have to arrest me in front of all these people, and I guarantee you that's going to be a much bigger problem for your boss than just letting us finish our concert." The security guards, faced with the prospect of physically dragging one of the world's most famous rock stars off stage in front of thousands of witnesses and dozens of cameras, hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, Freddie Mercury won the war. Dr. Michael Harrison, who documented the entire confrontation for his research, later wrote about the psychology of what had occurred. What Freddie accomplished was the complete reversal of power dynamics. In the span of 20 minutes, he had transformed from an employee of the venue into the venue's worst nightmare, an artist with the complete support of his audience and the moral authority that comes from fighting for principle rather than profit. Richard Walsh, realizing that any further escalation would result in a public relations disaster that could destroy his career, finally backed down. But his capitulation came with conditions that would make the resolution even more dramatic. Instead of simply allowing the concert to continue, Walsh demanded that Queen sign a legal waiver absolving the venue of any responsibility for what happened after the official end time. He also demanded additional payment for the overtime use of his facility. Freddie's response to these demands would become one of the most quoted exchanges in music industry history. "Mr. Walsh," he said, speaking directly to the venue manager in front of 12,000 witnesses, "I have a counteroffer for you. We'll finish our concert, we'll give these beautiful people the show they deserve, and then we'll never set foot in your building again. Because any venue that treats art with such disrespect doesn't deserve to host artists." The crowd's approval was thunderous, but Freddie wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "I'm going to make sure that every artist in the music industry knows exactly how you've conducted yourself tonight. Because artists need to know which venues respect art and which venues just see us as sources of revenue." This threat hit hit Walsh where it hurt most. In an industry where reputation was everything, being blacklisted by major acts could destroy a venue's profitability overnight. Faced with the prospect of industry-wide consequences for his actions, Walsh finally, grudgingly agreed to let the concert continue without further interference. But the story of that night was far from over. Queen didn't just finish their planned set. They delivered an additional 45 minutes of music, including multiple encore performances that had the Detroit crowd in absolute ecstasy. More importantly, they had proven a point that would resonate throughout the music industry for years to come. Word of the Detroit Rebellion spread through the music industry. Within days, artists who had previously accepted venue mistreatment began demanding better conditions. Venue operators who had been taking advantage of performers suddenly found themselves dealing with artists who were no longer willing to compromise their artistic integrity for convenience. The incident sparked a broader conversation about artist rights, venue responsibilities, and the proper relationship between business and art. Music industry publications ran extensive coverage of the confrontation, generally siding with Queen and using the Detroit incident as an example of why venues needed to treat performers with more respect. Perhaps most significantly, the rebellion established Freddie Mercury as more than just a performer. He became a symbol of artistic integrity and the principle that true art cannot be compromised by commercial concerns. Richard Walsh's career never recovered from the Detroit incident. Within 2 years he had been forced out of venue management entirely, unable to book major acts who remembered how he had treated Queen. Cobo Arena itself suffered reputational damage that took years to repair. Meanwhile, Queen's reputation was enhanced immeasurably. The story of their refusal to be intimidated spread through fan communities worldwide, earning them respect not just as musicians, but as artists willing to fight for their principles. Jim Beach later revealed that the Detroit Rebellion had been a turning point for Queen's career in America. After that night, every venue knew that Queen was not a band you messed with, he explained. We never had another serious venue dispute after Detroit because word had gotten around that we would not back down. The amateur footage of the confrontation became some of the most treasured bootleg material in Queen's catalog. Fans sought out recordings not just for the musical performances, but for the historical significance of witnessing artists successfully standing up to corporate intimidation. Brian May later wrote about the Detroit incident in his autobiography, describing it as the moment when Queen truly understood their power as artists. We'd always known we could entertain people, he reflected, but that night we learned we could inspire them, we could lead them, and we could fight for them when necessary. The rebellion also had lasting effects on Freddie personally. Band members reported that the experience had given him even greater confidence in his ability to handle any situation, and that he approached subsequent performances with an enhanced sense of his responsibility to his audiences. Concert industry professionals began studying the Detroit incident as a case study in how artists should handle venue disputes. The key lessons: maintain support of your audience, never compromise artistic integrity, and be willing to accept consequences for your principles, became standard advice for touring acts. The Detroit crowd that witnessed the rebellion became legendary in Queen fan circles. Many of them kept ticket stubs from that night as treasured memorabilia, understanding that they had been present for a historic moment when art triumphed over bureaucracy. If this story inspired you the way it inspired those 12,000 people in Detroit, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that standing up for your principles is always worth fighting for. What's the most powerful example of someone standing up to authority that you've ever witnessed? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of how true artists refuse to let anyone silence their voice. The spirit of artistic rebellion continues here on our channel, where every story reminds us that some things are too important to compromise, no matter what the cost.